Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I've spoken at a couple of codebar events before, but I'm sure that, that there's a lot more people here. My name's Caris Young. I look after all things tech talent within Gusto. Gusto, for those who don't know, are sponsoring this event. I'm really excited to be a part of this. You will see some food-related things come up as I go through this presentation. We are big foodies here, but basically what I'm here to do is talk through the recipe for your first job. And my unique perspective of that is from a recruitment angle and being a recruiter. So I've been in recruitment for a number of years now, all within the tech space. I've seen every role you can possibly think of, from data science to IT services to agile coaches to infrastructure to everything. So I've looked through the full gamut of tech roles. And the interesting thing about being a recruiter is I've done that all without having any knowledge on how to do them myself. So I think it's really useful for you guys in your quest for your first jobs to know what the first person and the first port of call that looks at your interview is thinking, and some tips and tricks from that perspective. So I'll run through. There's plenty of time for questions in the end, so please do bring them in. I want this to be as bespoke as possible. So you can see the food theme here. So the basic ingredients and how to stand out in your application. As a recruiter, for any normal role, I probably get around 500 to 600 applications a week. Do not be put off by that, but it's a fact that I think is important for people to know when they're looking for their first jobs, because what we're really trying to do with that CV, with that cover letter, is stand out and be really clear in why and how we think we're good for this role. So some tips I have for you within the protein is, firstly, on your CV, the key thing at the top here is don't overshare all of your contact details. So as long as we can get back in touch with you with an email address, with a phone number, with a LinkedIn profile, whatever it may be, they're really the key things that we want you to have on the top of that CV. The more you put in, truthfully, you may get caught by recruitment agencies, which I'm sure some people have experience with. You may get caught by people that are just harvesting data. So be careful about who you're sharing your contact details with. The second one is using words in the correct context. I know this feels granular, but this is so, so important. I want to know what you did and what your role in certain things were, as opposed to what we did or the team did. I'm interested in who you were. We're not interviewing your whole team. We're interested in what you're up to in this. So words like worked on, led, managed, all of those things tell me what your perspective in that particular one was. We versus I is a really big deliberator. You have to help me understand what your role in that was, because I don't necessarily know, as a recruiter or as all the recruiters that are filtering through CVs, I don't necessarily know who and where and what that thing is that you've been working on. So I need you to really take me through and tell me the story of your specific involvement in that. The third one here kind of sinks into that, outlining your responsibilities and your achievements. A lot of people can fall into the trap of writing their CV as a number of job descriptions. So a lead developer, for example, and just writing what a lead developer does on a day-to-day basis within that company. It's great. It tells me whether or not your job is similar to my job that I'm looking for. And that's really useful, I suppose. But what's more useful, if you can add these onto it, is actually writing what you've achieved whilst you've been in that position. So whether you have created or worked on a project that's been really significant to budget, or whether you pulled something really early on a deadline, or something similar to that. I want to know what you did well in your job, and also as well as the responsibilities. Tailoring your CV. Someone spoke about this earlier in terms of sending 2 CVs. However you want to tailor your CV, please tailor your CV. The amount of people and the amount of applications I've had that have left really relevant things that I know are for other companies, or even the other companies' names in. I mean, that's more of a cover letter thing, but different things that I can tell they've tailored it, but they haven't tailored it to me and my role and what I'm looking for. I think that's really, really important, because you can make yourself seem even more relevant job by job. Not all 2 jobs are the same. So if my role is looking for one particular tool or framework, so-and-so's role may not be. So just make sure if you have those, you're really honing in on what's specifically relevant to each role. And then keep it clean and concise. Come back to that stat of, I see quite a few CVs on a daily basis as a recruiter. What's really key here is that it's kept clean. Please don't do that thing that people say where they say, keep your CV to 1 page. It doesn't need to be 1 page, because actually what that does is pull loads of information into a really busy space. But make sure that your experience is outlined, that your academia is outlined, that your skill sets are outlined, maybe that your technology is outlined, and it all has its place and it all fits in nicely and tells the story of who you are, what you're looking for, and sort of any relevant experience that you have. So I'd say there's some quick tips and tricks from a recruiter on your CV. For cover letter, and yes, I do think we should still do cover letters. It's a contested area in the recruitment world, but I think they can be really useful for basically giving a blurb for your CV. So all of the things that a CV outlines, putting a little bit of personality on top of that doesn't hurt. And yes, we do read them as well as recruiters. I think that's important to know. But like I say at the first one, this is your hello. This is the time to introduce yourself, to maybe talk to us about what you're looking for and your motivations for a new role, how you've come across us, for example. So that 3rd bullet point there, showing your interest in our company. How did you come across Gusto, for example, or any other company that you're applying for? What brought you into my inbox? Again, tailoring your cover letter. This feels really like a lot of work to do for each of your individual applications. And some of you may be applying to multiple roles a day. But I think tailoring these things just they tip you over that edge of people that aren't doing this. And the 4th point that I've put on cover letter can be a really useful way to get that workload down. I don't mind if you use ChatGPT, as long as when you read over what AI has written for you, and it makes sense and it correlates and it's relevant to who you are. This is a really great way that we can do a lot of work in a much shorter time. At Gusto, we're actively looking for ways to, how can we implement AI? How can we use ChatGPT to be more productive? So what a strange thing it would be if for us to say, actually, we don't like it when candidates use them in applications. If anything, it's quite a good way to just get that productivity up and that workload down. So that's really the core of what you're looking at when you're looking at an application. Just a few tips or tricks there. I know that there's been a lot in the previous talks, which has been incredibly helpful, that I've been watching as well. And then don't forget about LinkedIn. As a recruiter, I would say I spend 4 to 5 hours a day on LinkedIn, probably, whether that's reaching out to people that look right for the roles that I have, or conversing with the people that are reaching out about the roles that we have as well. So just a few tips and tricks on here. I'm going to hone in on a couple because I want to make sure that we've got more than enough time afterwards for questions. But making sure that your open to work is on. What that does in the back end of LinkedIn for recruiters is it pings up in a special category. So that will be their priority people, because you're open to work, we're looking for someone who's looking for work. Those two things seem to make a match. So make sure that you always have that on if you're looking for it. There is an option where you can say, put my open to work on, but don't show anyone that you're currently looking for. That won't matter so much in your first tech job, but if you're interning and you don't want them to know, pop that one on. Include your role changes and promotions, maybe not for your first tech job, but for any other tech jobs, for the career changes that are potentially listening in. All of your different roles within different things. It shows us your progression. It shows us what you can do, and that other places value those transferable skills as well. So I'm definitely looking at that when I'm looking at my career changes. And then finally, just making sure that your skills part, I mean, all of these are relevant, but making sure that your skills part is really well defined. So we're looking for your languages, your tools, what accreditations have you done? There's lots of accreditations on LinkedIn that might be worth looking at for people. What ones of those have you done, and where can you put those on your profile as well? So a few tips and tricks here. I make sure hopefully Kimberly can send this round, or Kevin can send this round, but we'll see what happens. just my LinkedIn as well for anyone that wants to connect. And also as a recruiter, I'd say I have a pretty good baseline for what a good LinkedIn profile looks like. So feel free to use this link or copy this link and jump on. Again, I'll put it in the chat or I'll ask someone to put it in the chat afterwards. So the recruiter screen, I'm sure people may or may not have been through a recruiter screen before. To introduce a recruiter screen is anything from 15 to 30 to 40-minute conversation right at the beginning of the interview process. They tend to be the first person you speak to. And they are not a technical person. They're by no means the hiring manager for the role. They are just people like me who are employed to make sure that the right people are going through to the right stages. My job isn't to do technology, it's to employ really great technology people. And so I wanted to run through a little bit of what you should expect from a recruiter screen and how you can prepare for one, because they can be a little bit more tricky. I love this quote from Greg, hiring an attitude, not just experience or qualification. I think all that's been said about nerves and everything is absolutely spot on. Don't worry about all of that. We're not trying in a recruiter screen to get to the hardcore experiences or qualifications we have. It's really much more about that wider understanding experience, the conversation that happens. I hesitate to use the terms culture fit, but we're looking for, can this person work well with our company values? And is that something that's going to be right for them as well? Because as we all know, interviews are very much two-way processes. So what is a recruiter screen? A recruiter screen can be a number of things, but generally in my experience, they are one of these 5 things, if not all of these 5 things. So from the bottom up, probably actually would be the way in which you can expect them to happen. Probably should have structured them that way, but there we are. So finding out a little bit more about you. What was your experience? What have you been up to? Why are you interested in the role? How have you looked at the job description and found the relevance between yourself and what we're looking for? And just talking through all that to make sure that for our teams, the baseline of the understanding of, how you relate to the role makes sense. We will check what I like to call the logistics of the role. That's what we're there to do. So anything like motivations for applying to role, location, we'll know what hybrid working can be for different companies, making sure that that works for you, what your notice period is if you have one, what your interview availability is if you have one. I'll come on to salary expectations quickly afterwards, because I think that's one to dwell on. Right to works in the UK. Can they sponsor a candidate? Can they not sponsor a candidate? All of these things that are really important for you from a candidate perspective to know, rather than a future tech professional. That's really, really what the recruiter is trying to do. The goal of a successful recruiter screen from the back end as a recruiter is to be able to recommend a profile to a hiring manager and say, these are the reasons I think X is a great option, but also we don't have to worry about any of the logistics. They're covered. We've checked, and actually on paper, both us and the candidate could fit the role really nicely. So that's what you can expect from a recruiter screen. Now, the big one is obviously the salary question. I probably get more questions on how to talk about salaries and whether to talk about them or be open or wait till they tell you. It's probably the topic of conversation I get most questions on when we talk about this. I've put a few tips in there for you. But the first thing and the most important thing I would say is don't worry about speaking about salaries, particularly with a recruiter. If you have a good recruiter, they talk about salaries day in, day out. It's become such a frequent conversation that there's no awkwardness on their part, even though it is a sensitive topic of conversation. But if you get a good recruiter, you should be able to lean on them for this. My recommendation from my experience is don't give a number first. So know what the market rate is. Know where you're comfortable. Absolutely. You should know around about what banding you are comfortable in and what numbers you're looking for. However, don't write it in an application form. Don't say this amount without any input from them. If you possibly can, your best question to ask a recruiter at that stage is ask them what the salary banding they are. And if they say they haven't got a salary banding, well, what numbers are you currently interviewing other candidates at, so that I can check that my market research fits in with that. There is nothing wrong with asking that question. And if anything, you are doing yourself a service by asking it. You want to make sure that you aren't giving a number that maybe is much, much lower than they're willing to offer. You want to make sure that you're paid adequately for the skills that they're asking for. That's so important. And I think whether it's your first ever role, your first tech role, your 7th tech role, you're a C-suite, people still come and ask me these questions of when should I talk about it? When does it feel appropriate? As soon as you can, and do it knowing that they definitely have a number that's in their mind already. Also, don't forget to ask about the entire benefits package. Sometimes the salary is, obviously the salary is important, but I think the whole package of what you're going for. So you can have shares or share options or bonus structures or holiday days or whatever is important to you. You need to make sure that in that recruiter screen, you're really getting that from the person that you're speaking to. Finishing touches, using a recruiter to your advantage. So the role of a recruiter, as I said, is not to be an expert in tech. So how can you use that relationship to your best advantage? A recruiter will book all of your interviews generally, or maybe a recruitment coordinator will, but someone in the recruitment team generally will book your interviews for you if they're a company that has a big TA team within them or a reasonable TA team in them. That will normally be the way that it happens. Making sure you catch up on your feedback throughout. Your recruiter is your main point of contact to get feedback. If you've not heard from anyone, hound your recruiter. If you haven't got enough feedback or you need to talk through some feedback that you maybe disagree with, hound your recruiter. That's really where you leverage that relationship. Salary check-ins. I know we just spoke about doing it at the start, but check in on those topics of conversation as you continue to go through the process. Make sure that that still feels right, that that's still what they're offering, that they're still comfortable around that number, so that there's no surprises when you get to the end of recruitment process and lo and behold, it's the number that you've been discussing all along. The offer process and salary negotiations generally are held by a recruiter as well. Reason just being that that's what we're there to do, right? We're there to make the hire happen. And that is a part of making the hire happen. If it doesn't quite go so well, recruiters are always the best person to keep in touch for any future relevant roles as well. So can you add me to a community pool? Can you add me to a reading list or a touch point list if you're comfortable with that, for any future relevant roles that you have in the business? And finally, keep in touch with your recruiters. Recruiters can be really, really useful people. There are a lot of them out there. Some are good, some are bad, as with most things. But a good recruiter will move around and will take you with them. So if you are great and have done great, which I'm sure you all are, and you get in touch and get really close to that recruiter, when they go, they will have you in mind for their next roles. And so the more good recruiters that you can connect with, in my opinion, the better. But obviously I am slightly biased, so that's something to consider. I'm going to wrap up there and hopefully Kimberly or Kevin jump back on, just because I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for questions and everything like that.
What are the telltale signs that a cover letter or CV has not been tailored?
Great question. So generally, I can tell, well, first of all, don't leave the other company's name in it. You would be shocked at the amount of times that happens. I'd love to come and work for NatWest. And I'm like, oh, that's a shame because I don't work for NatWest.
Oh, no.
Really, please double check yourself when you're doing that. That's a really important one. But similarly, imagine you're writing a profile for yourself and it sounds like so I always call them astrology cover letters, and I don't mean that in a horrible way, but anything that could be anyone. So for example, if it's I'd love to come and work for a company your size, or I'm really interested in companies that are doing the sort of things you're doing, rather than making food boxes in our particular example, or around the 1,000 employee mark, just try and bring those little bits. And honestly, best trick is if you write it out as if it could be for anyone, and then just put some things in italics and change those little bits and pieces around for each of the companies that you're going for. So number of employees, what do they do? How many people sort of are they looking for in a role? Such an easy way to get that through. And it looks bespoke. It fools the recruiters of the world. We put it through, and it means that you haven't done loads and loads of work crafting this beautiful cover letter for each one.
What are your thoughts on a photo on a CV? I saw one recently and I was like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I don't mind personally. I think I would say nice but unnecessary. I think a photo on a LinkedIn incredibly important because it just shows me that you've paid attention to your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's a place that I can connect with you. But a photo on a CV, I would say probably makes no difference. The only thing I would say is, not for me and not for us as a company, but sometimes with certain industries or companies, you want to be as standardized as you can in case of unconscious bias. So make sure that some places do this blind CV checking where they take the names off and stuff because they have to go to that extent to be careful. So if you're worried that it's going to invoke any unconscious bias in someone, or you've heard things, then be careful about it. But other than that, I think for most people it's a nice thing to see, but not necessary.
You just made me go and look at my LinkedIn just to check what my photo was, because I was like, I don't go on LinkedIn like a huge amount, but I was just like, oh wow, what picture do I actually have on mine?
Yeah, it's the things that tell us whether you've been on your LinkedIn is the photos, so the banner photo as well. So loads of people have them from their old companies.
Yeah.
The banner photo and the profile picture, and then whether you've actually interacted with any articles. So my advice would be as active on your LinkedIn as you can if you're using LinkedIn as the platform to apply for roles.
Yeah.
I would recommend. I think it's a great platform.
So someone has asked, do you have any experience with higher view screening?
Higher view screening, I think, and please tell me if I'm wrong, I think higher view screening is where you create a little video and answer a set of questions. So a company will come up with a set of questions or a problem for you to work through.
Okay.
And then you will basically answer that as part of your application. This can happen quite a lot. So we do this quite a bit with some fulfillment centers that we have. And the reason that we do that is because we are looking for a certain thing from that application process, and it makes it more personal. I would say that we're probably going to start looking at more things like this as these programs and this software starts to be integrated better. I personally don't mind it at all. I think it's quite nice to see a video of the person that I might be talking to. I would say just be careful in what they're asking you. If it feels like they're getting work out of you before you've even spoke to a person, I don't love that idea. So if they're just asking you to introduce yourself, lovely. If they're asking for a bit of work or a sort of the start of a project, probably be a bit wary of that one.
Yeah, that's fair. Someone has asked, what do you recommend to a recent bootcamp grad trying to stand out for an entry-level role?
This is a great question as well. I know a lot of boot camps. I know a lot of boot camp grads. I think what's really key and what sets people that have had lucky enough to have the experience of going to a boot camp apart is the technical skills that you've learned there. And most of the boot camps that I'm aware of, so Makers Academy or Lewagon, places like this, they tend to work you in agile teams or in an industry setting almost. So the perk of a boot camp to a recruiter would be you have worked in a cross-functional team potentially, or with other people doing other languages, you've collaborated on a project like that. I think the way that you make that stand out is really think outside of I learned Python, I learned Ruby, I learned Java, whatever it is. Think about what else did you learn on that boot camp. So was it working with a delivery manager or working to a deadline or having a cross-functional team that you sat within? Those softer, quote unquote, skills are what really is going to set you apart in a boot camp. I think also a lot of the time I see people not utilizing, like the boot camps themselves tend to have really good relationships with people. I think, I don't know if the person who asked the question has tried this or not, but go back to the boot camp and see, are they doing a careers fair, or are they talking to people like me that are coming in and doing some talks or trying to understand or get different things from people, because generally they make relatively good connections within the industry. So I think definitely going back can be quite useful.
Yeah, definitely. The next question is ageism a thing in tech? This person's got quite a lot of experience and they said they've actually ended up deleting 15 years of work experience from their CV so that it just starts from 2009?
Yeah, so I don't think it's I to dissect the question, firstly, I would say I think, you know, part of the reasons that groups like this are here is that there are biases within the tech industry. So to say that there's not ageism in the tech industry, quite honestly, would probably be a lie. What I would say in that particular example, in terms of deleting experience, though, is that because my experience of the tech industry as a recruiter is that it's very quick and fast paced. I mean, Gusto's probably the biggest company I've worked for, and it's only about 1,000 to 1,500 people. What you need to do when you're looking at that is look at probably the most relevant recent roles. So I always recommend to people they put their last 3 relevant recent roles on their CV. Now, I know for this person who's asking this question, that cancels out a lot of incredible stuff that they've done and probably feels quite uncomfortable to hear that. But I think what you're trying to do, you have to remember there's a lot of CVs to get through, and we read through them a lot. So if there's a lot of information on there that feels repetitive, so once I've got you can do something, I've got it, and I'm looking for the next thing, and I'm after what else we're after. So I think in that particular instance, it may be that there's a lot on there as opposed to the time in which it's taken for you to get that amount of experience. My recommendation would actually be put the punchiest things on there and then talk about it in your recruiter screen. All that your CV is trying to do is get you to that next stage, and all that next stage does is get you to the next stage. So really, once you've passed the recruiter screen, your CV has just got you to that point. So all you're trying to do in your CV is get to that first conversation. Once you've got that first conversation, then you can put all that color around it. Then you can explain, actually, I've been working for 15 years. And I've done all these incredible things. I just wanted to show you what was really relevant, really fast, so that I can come and tell you this story. And I think that would be my advice. I hope that helps. But I'm sorry that someone's feeling like that.
In your answer, you mentioned, you know, miss out some bits because you don't want to repeat yourself. You often hear this myth, and maybe it's because I'm a woman as well, but having a gap in your CV is really bad.
Oh.
What would your response to that be?
I would say that there are a million reasons you can have a gap in your CV, and that if I looked at my LT team and MT team at Gusto, so my managers and my leaders, I don't know, most of them have had a gap in their CVs, and they wouldn't think about it in the slightest. Gaps in your CVs generally are there for a reason, whether they're bringing up a family or having your first child or just getting away for a while to go traveling. Very, very rarely do gaps in their CV mean someone hasn't done something that has made them a better person. And I think if you can articulate that, so the amount of transferable skills, I don't know, I haven't had a child, but the amount of transferable skills I can imagine to having a child, for example, when you're a woman is insane. Working to deadlines, not a problem, you know? So
working well under pressure.
Imagine, haven't been there myself. So do you know what I mean? So please, the more I can do to dispel this myth, the better. Unless you've had 6 months off to sit on the sofa and do nothing, which is going to be tricky to explain, but 90% of the time you can explain this. And if you have got a gap in your CV, reach out to someone like me. Ask them how they would put it in your particular instance. Like talk it through with your peers or your partner or your friends and say, like, what do you think I actually got out of the amount of time I've not been in work that I can put on my CV to show how much I've grown in that time period still? I think.
Because I think if I was speaking to a candidate and I saw that they had like a year gap and they'd gone traveling, I would just want to know all about it. I'll be like, that sounds absolutely sick. Like, what were you doing in that year? Like, please tell me about it.
The whole point of hiring diversely is that we have different people with different opinions, and the product of going traveling tends to be that you learn different opinions and learn different people. So that in itself is I learned all about the cultures in XYZ. That's a huge coup to you as a candidate. I think that's a phenomenal thing and plus I'll be incredibly jealous.
Yeah.
Always
I
helps.
just then want to know all about what they were doing.
Yeah,
I think also it shows real drive to go, do you know
absolutely.
what? Like, I want to see the world. I want to learn about different foods, different cultures, like you said, like different people. Like, it also shows a real appetite for like exploration, which actually as a developer is incredibly important, because a key thing about developer is learning. You know, like you said, like if you're hiring a junior developer, one of the key skills is the ability to learn and explore. And actually, if you've gone, let's say, traveling for a year, like you said, those transferable skills, like Anna was saying earlier, those transferable skills, it shows so much about a person.
And being out of your comfort zone as well. I think I'm not worried that you're going to be stressed if you've taken yourself off solo around the world. You know, like it's there's definitely, if
and
you talk,
probably handled tricky situations as well, because it might be that you've gone somewhere where English isn't the first language. So yeah, so many transferable skills. It's such a myth that I still hear, and I'm like, it's a load of crap.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, there's good and bad in the recruitment world, unfortunately.
So we've had another question come in, and it's about someone's GitHub profile.
Okay.
So they said, should my GitHub account include files other than just code, e.g. a reflective journal on a project?
That's a great question. I would say that anything you put in your GitHub profile, unlike your CV, is good. So as long as your GitHub profile includes examples of everything you could do. So I would look at a reflective journal as like documentation evidence. So documentation is a massive part of what my team.
I've worked with so many terrible developers great developers who are terrible at documentation.
And it's a nightmare, and it's unscalable, and it makes the job harder for everyone else. So I think that's a marvelous idea, and actually you're going to wish you hadn't said that, because everybody else on here is going to start copying your idea. But I think that's an excellent idea, and I think your GitHub profile is not like your CV. The more you can put on your Git, because what I do as a recruiter, I don't understand most of what you've coded, truthfully. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't. But I can go through it and see these are real world examples of this person. And when I'm introducing you to my hiring manager, that's just another string in your bow, truthfully. It's put as much in there as you can. It just shows that you're active.
And like you said, if you've got 400 to 500 people, how are you standing out? And that, like you just said, you'd be like, oh, that's really different.
100%. Same in design. So a design portfolio, even for your first design role, if you've just played around with some software, different types of software, seen what you can mock up or prototype or whatever, great. Like anything that you're doing that other people aren't doing is good.
And the same person has mentioned that they gave a 10-minute talk at a tech meetup, which again, I think is really great. Where should they mention that?
Great one. So I would mention that either, so that could be cover letter worthy, I think, for sure, to show your motivations and your excitement about the industry that you're trying to join. I think that's a really good one for your cover letter. But then I'd repeat it again in that little blurb that you put on your CV. So, hi, my name is X. I'm really excited to, get into the tech industry. I've been going around the tech industry for however many years, including talks such as, and then that is a great link right at the top of your CV that's going to make you stand out. And then we'll look through the rest of it. But all of my hiring managers look at things like that. So when they get past me and it stands out enough to me, all of them watch those things and are excited by those things. So
if you've got if you've got an online portfolio, you could just have another section in your online portfolio that says talks. And then if you can link to the talk as well,
oh my God, if I can see you talking about something, we have to have less of a conversation, truthfully. I can see who you are and how you talk and how you communicate and all of those things from that talk. So the chances are your recruit screen gets a whole lot shorter, which is a positive. The shorter the recruitment screen, as long as you go through, the better, by the way. It means that we don't need to check anything through.
And, if you want to practice talking at any events, this type of event is a great opportunity. Codebar itself, you got this. There are so many other amazing organizations as well where, that really welcome first-time speakers as well. So that's, like you were saying about how can you stand out amongst all these other applications. If you're if you've already started speaking and you're a junior, it's phenomenal. It's amazing.
And it's pretty unheard of.
Yes.
So definitely a good tip there, actually.
Someone at a codebar event mentioned to me that they were, they'd had a podcast and they were like, talking about like the tech world and what their interview process had been like. And I just found it so interesting because again, like there are not many good tech podcasts out there. Some are awful, but there are some also really good ones. But a lot of them are also from the angle of being really experienced. And I was like, I think this is genius. And again, like all these ways that you can stand out. Like, imagine if you got a CV that was like, I'm a junior dev, this is my first role. But look, I've got this podcast.
Yeah. Or even some people, I had a junior candidate recently send me, she'd been making TikToks about about like funny ones, comedy ones, but about like getting rejected from jobs or finding interviews difficult. And it told me who she was. And I think when you're in those early stages, if you can, it's like anyone, we gravitate to the people that we feel we know closer, right? So the more you can tell me the story of who you are and introduce yourself, just subconsciously in that recruiter, in that hiring manager's mind, you're leveling up, you're getting up there because we know who you are. We feel connected to you in some way.
And also, you're seeing more of what that person's like because actually in the interview, they might be nervous. Ooh. So actually that side of that comedic, funny side just may not come out because they're nervous. So actually, if you see that in their TikTok, you're like, actually, like, it's okay because they may be nervous in the interview.
Exactly. So I think if you're confident, and I mean, obviously some people don't want to do those things and that's totally fair.
Yeah.
But if you can get it up or maybe group up with people and figure it out together, if you don't feel confident enough to do it on your own, boot camp people, I'm looking at you. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a great way to do it as well.
Yeah. So we don't have any more questions. Is there anything else about CVs, interviewing, cover letters that you want to add before we wrap up?
I would say don't lose faith. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of people out there, as we can tell from all being at this event. It doesn't, because you get rejected, it doesn't mean you're not good enough. And it doesn't mean that you can't. It just means in that particular time, it wasn't the right role or it wasn't the right time. It is sometimes, unfortunately, in your first tech role, it can be a bit of a matter of getting there first or getting there as quickly as you can. So it's not always in your control. And I don't want that to be something that people worry about. It's just one of those things, unfortunately. Don't let it get you down. Always reach out to people that are at the companies as well. So if you get a rejection, tend to be from a recruiter, tap that recruiter on the shoulder in the form of an invite on LinkedIn and just say, hey, notice the rejection, appreciate the feedback, but I wondered if we could connect and just keep in touch for future roles. Goes a high, get something out of every application you do, even if it's a rejection, get a connection out of it or understand who rejected you or who's hiring for the role. Get something out of every rejection you get, because in all levels at all roles there is rejection and it's part of what we do, but it's not a reflection on yourself.
Oh, perfect. I think that's a lovely way to end this first event in our series of landing your first job. So thank you so much for coming along and giving this talk.